So cyberbullying, trolling, online addiction, anxiety disorders, depression, self-harm, suicide, many terms that we've heard during the morning session. The current generation of kids faces many new threats to their mental well-being. And research from many countries clearly shows we should be alert and cautious. On one hand, our kids are born into a world with amazing new possibilities enabled by modern technology and the internet. On the other hand, this age also brings new challenges. The mental well-being of youngsters is, in some countries, measurably getting worse. Although this cannot be directly and singularly attributed to excessive use of technology, there are some indications this does play an important role, not only in their daily lives, but also impacts their mental health. Only looking at a few selected statistics, in the US we see a rise in self-harm and suicide among Generation Z, especially among girls. From earlier this year, the UK Millennium Cohort study on nearly 11,000 14-year-olds shows correlation between depressive symptoms and length of social media use. The more hours they spent on social media, the more depressive symptoms have shown. In the Czech Republic, part of the EU Kids Online research study, 7% of respondents on a weekly basis, aged 9 to 17, said they had gone without eating or sleeping because of the internet. 15% agreed that they had neglected family, friends, or schoolwork because of time spent on the internet. 13% agreed that they had felt bothered when they could not be online. 20% have tried to reduce their time unsuccessfully using online. And 22% have caught themselves using the internet although they were not really interested. So all of these percentages describe weekly frequency of these experiences in Czech Republic. Now, dear panelists, I would like to pose the first question. It seems to me that the enthusiasm from the advances of technology are in a way accompanied by a digital disillusion. What do we know today about negative consequences brought upon our lives by the internet and especially social media? Daria, would you be willing to open?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Okay, let's... Yes, can you all hear me? Is that all fine, also in the back of the room? Okay, great. So negative consequences of internet use. Well, as you know, I've researched that for many years now. And what the research evidence base shows is that excessive use of technology, including gaming as well as social media, in some instances can be related to psychopathology. So we've seen associations with depressive symptoms, anxiety symptoms, increased stress, increased feelings of loneliness. In certain studies, psychoticism has been associated with that as well, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, a wide variety of personality disorders as well. So generally speaking, I mean, you know, taking the research that has been conducted all around the world, it seems that if people tend to use technology excessively, in some instances, there may be very negative consequences which may impact them, possibly also over the long term. Is that a sufficient answer to your question?
Oh yes, that's quite a long list of problems that can arise from excessive use. Michaela, would you like to comment on your views, because you have a lot of hands-on experience?
Děkuji za slovo, já vám také přeji příjemné pozdní odpoledne. V těch negativních důsledků je spoustu a určitě v tom čase, který tady teď máme, nestihneme všechny vyjmenovat. Já si spíš kladu jinou otázku a to, co bylo dřív. A nechci tady teď rozvíjet filozofickou diskuzi, jestli závislost na sociálních sítích anebo některé jiné duševní poruchy typu neurotismus, depresivní stavy, úzkostné stavy, hraniční poruchy osobnosti a tak podobně. V rámci ambulance, ve které tedy pracuji a odkud mám nejvíc zkušeností, tak se potkáváme s dětmi, respektive s rodinnými systémy, kde se vlastně objevují tyhle ty duševní, nazvěme to poruchy, nebo respektive nepříjemné stavy dětí daleko dříve, než oni vůbec přijdou do kontaktu s internetem jako takovým. Tím chci říct, že kdyby možná byla rodičům nabídnuta, ať už je to nějaká jako dlouhodobá péče, nebo aspoň v prvopočátku nějaká první rada, jak preventivně dětem vůbec jako vysvětlovat, jak se chovat na sociálních sítích, ale hlavně jak s nimi mluvit, komunikovat, jak zjistit, jak se jejich děti vůbec mají, jestli se jim daří dobře nebo ne, tak by to bylo fajn. Takže když nějaký způsoby, já bych teď měla nabídnout, tak řešit to ještě dřív, než až hasit potom ty problémy, které vznikají, ať už ze závislosti, anebo z jiného navykového chování na sociálních sítích.
Děkuju. Thank you. That brings me to a question. I haven't heard much about a particular topic today, which is how important it is for parents to set a good example to their children and what role it might have for young kids today, already being born to a generation of parents who are accustomed to a smartphone being a part of their daily lives. And how mindful should parents be about setting a correct example to their kids?
Děti se rodí do digitálního světa, takže děti jsou vlastně digitálními domorodci, oni jsou v tom světě naprosto v pohodě, nebo s tím světem jsou v pohodě, jsou daleko víc napřed, ať už informativně, nebo i se svými schopnostmi, než my dospělí. Takže nápodoba, tak jak my jsme zvyklí, tady úplně nefunguje, protože děti se od nás učit nemohou. Myslím si, že je fajn, kdybychom my dospělí se začali učit od dětí a nebáli se toho. To znamená brát je jako partnery, kteří se umí pohybovat ve světě, ve kterém my už neumíme, a mluvit s nimi o tom na té partnerské úrovni, takže se navzájem ovlivňovat. A tahle ta komunikace by měla být už od malinka, to znamená, jakmile dítěti dávám do ruky mobilní telefon, tak s ním budu mluvit o tom, co se mu tam líbí, co se mu tam nelíbí. Začíná to jednoduše večerníčkem, můžeme si potom společně s dětmi sednout a říct si, hele, tak kdyby si byl v této pohádce, v jaký roli by si chtěli být a proč, co se ti na tom líbilo, nelíbilo, co si u toho cítil. A děti se takhle naučí mluvit o svých pocitech se svými rodiči. Pak je velká pravděpodobnost, že když se dítě dostane do toho internetového digitálního světa, tak bude mít chuť a ochotu s rodiči tímto způsobem mluvit.
So it's obviously important to maintain an open discussion in the families. So what about in the UK? I mean, do you think there are family guidelines of some sort, or something that should be there in order for excessive use of internet and smartphones not to be out of hand, out of control? Please, Bernatka, I would be glad if you spoke.
Yes, so completely agree about the importance of open dialogue, and what we would say at the Royal College of Psychiatrists, it's about having that open relationship, and it's just an extension of normal parenting, so parents shouldn't be too frightened. They need to put in boundaries in place, support their children when they need that, and also be honest and open with them, and having those discussions as early on as possible is really, really important. So from a very young age, as you were saying, it's so important to have that dialogue. And there is data and evidence that has shown that if parents are too strict and too restrictive around the use of social media and technology, that can have the opposite effect. You know, who likes being told what to do? So it's about explaining to your children what you might be worried about and then coming to some sort of consensus about how you manage that together. I just wanted to make a point about the evidence as well. Can I? So in terms of the evidence base, I mean, as you know, in the UK, there's been lots of arguments about that, hasn't there? So there's lots of what we call cross-sectional studies showing there's an association between different poor mental health outcomes and use of social media and screen time. But there have been far fewer long-term, what we call longitudinal studies showing a direct causation, although they are emerging. But again, the methods still need to be improved because they are very limited. And what we really do need to be asking the questions about, and about the questions you ask, it's about those most vulnerable young people. You know, we're talking about autism, for example, children with learning disabilities and how they're affected. So those are the studies that we still really need.
I'd just like to add a few thoughts on this, because I think one of the things that we're asking parents to come to terms with or even understand is very sophisticated technology and then its impact on development. And one of the challenges we've had in the UK is the media, almost on alternate days, will report technology is dangerous, will impact adversely on development, and the next day there is no harm, it is just advantageous. And I think parents and professionals, for that matter, are often confronted with contradictory evidence that no doubt is emerging, but you almost need a sort of graduate level understanding of statistic models and methodologies which is not necessarily compatible with being an empathic and attuned parent. So I think there is a challenge about, are there some guidelines where you just don't have to be a rocket scientist to do the right thing?
Yeah, especially when looking at kids, obviously are the one of the most vulnerable groups. I mean, we've mentioned it in the morning session that the groups that are most vulnerable, such as kids, we need to pay special attention to potential impacts of online media, social media. Well, so if let's say if I'm a parent which has the average knowledge base, I'm probably not a techno geek and probably just trying to manage on a day-to-day basis. What can a parent do, or what should he do in order to raise his kids in a way so that they navigate safely online? Are there any best practices that would be easily understandable to an average parent?
Děkuji. Univerzální radu vám nedám, ale také jsem matka 2 dětí, takže mohu vám říct, co fungovalo u mě a co funguje i u rodičů, kterým nabízíme adiktologickou nebo vůbec jakoukoliv pomoc. A to je vrátit se k té pravé podstatě a k tomu teda, co ten proč vlastně jsme děti si pořídili, proč jsme je chtěli a začít důvěřovat sami sobě. My máme zkušenost, že mamky ani tátové si neví už, jestli to, co dělají, jestli je správně, jestli to je za hranou, nebo není, pořád hledají nějakou správnou cestu, čtou miliony různých knih, publikací, hledají na internetu, jak se to správně dělá a zapomínají na to, že někde uvnitř intuitivně vlastně ví, jak mají dítě vychovávat. Takže v první řadě bych se pokusila doporučit, aby se nejdřív zastavili a sami sobě zodpověděli tu otázku, jak by to chtěli oni, jak si myslí, že je to správně, co cítí, že je správně ve výchově a teprve potom ve chvíli, kdyby si byli nejistí, tak aby se teda chodili doptávat odborníků nebo lidí z okolí. Pak mám jednu věc, která se týká osobní zodpovědnosti, mě to teda hodně trápí, já mám pocit, že se to někde úplně vytratilo a myslím tím učit děti osobní zodpovědnosti v tom slova smyslu, že my jako lidé máme volbu. Myslím si, že máme volbu takřka ve všem. My jsme snad jediná bytost na téhle planetě, která má 100% volbu. My se můžeme rozhodnout, že zítra tady nebudeme, můžeme z tohohle světa kdykoliv odejít. To zvířata ani kytky nemohou, když tedy pominu několik ovcí, který se skákali ze skály. A když máme volbu se rozhodnout, jestli budeme žít nebo ne, tak také máme volbu i se rozhodnout, jakou budeme mít náladu. Jestli se budeme zajímat o tohle nebo o tohle, jestli budeme mluvit o svých emocích, jestli budeme dávat najevo a jestli, já nevím, jestli vybereme svíčkovou nebo koprovku a tak dále. A máme volbu se opravdu rozhodovat úplně ve všem. Tak posilovat tu osobní zodpovědnost v tom slova smyslu, aby si řekli děti, tak sakra, tak proč jsem se teď rozhodl tady posílat intimní fotky na internetu? Je to proto, že mě k tomu někdo donutil, nebo protože jsem chtěl? Je to proto, že chci být zajímavý, nebo prostě proto, že mi kamarád řekl, že to taky tak dělá?
Wanting to stay a little bit longer in the arena of parenting, I mean, I understand, let's say, the healthy approach is understandable, yet we still, I mean, we see around ourselves so many examples of screens being used to have some time off from parenting. When I go to kindergarten, to a kindergarten play, most of the parents have their phones on, and rather than enjoying the experience themselves, they just film it. So there are so many, and obviously from the research that we have also seen today, parents aren't aware what their kids are doing online. There are probably quite a few missteps that are being done on the way. So are these missteps just consequences of other missteps in parenting in general, or is there something specific that a parent should? Because we're talking a lot, and we have had talk yesterday about wanting to raise awareness. So what is it we want to raise awareness about?
I just wanted to add to the parenting issue. I mean, the most important thing you can do is set boundaries early on, as you would do with parenting for anything. So, you know, when you have children, it's so much easier if you teach little children what's acceptable, what isn't. If you try and impose that when they're much older, as anybody in the audience will know, it's a nightmare. So if you start to establish those boundaries really early when they're little, it's a lot easier. What did we do personally? We weren't that bothered about how long they spent on the screens, as long as they did everything else that was necessary for a healthy lifestyle. So as long as they exercised, did their sports, played their music, did their homework, helped with the chores, and made eye contact with us occasionally, had a conversation, I was happy. And funnily enough, over time, they've actually spent less time on social media. I remember going to my son's bedroom one night at midnight. I said, "What are you doing under those covers? You've got school. Show me what you're looking at." And obviously, I was terrified of what I was going to see there. And it was fishing magazines. What fish? Fish today, fish tomorrow, because all he's interested in is fishing. So I was very pleased about that. But I think that's the most important message. You know, good parenting, set boundaries really early on, and your life will be so much easier later.
Richard, if I may, have a question aimed towards you. You've been speaking on the topic of digital profile in terms of you know, a profile of a person's digital day today to a certain extent. What role does the digital profile of a person play in psychological and psychiatric work, and why is it especially important among young people?
When you say digital profile, is that someone's digital life?
Let's say the day in the life, the digital day in the life of a person.
Yes, I mean, my sense is now that all of us would have a use of technology, our smartphones, the apps on it, the social media, the way we interact in a way that is probably as unique to you as your DNA or fingerprint. And we are living through those devices, through those platforms, I think as you were saying earlier, Daria, in a way that whatever is happening to you in your life, whether you're happy or unhappy, depressed, anxious, one would want to understand how that element of your life was part of your experience in the same way where you live or what your work is or what your achievements are, what your relationships are like. That, I mean, it's more like a neighborhood, it seems to me, that you want to understand. And how we then start to ask those questions that enable someone to talk about that, but in a way that they're not going to experience as judgmental. Because I think all of us are finding our way, feeling very uncertain, and that is true of small children as much as older adults, although perhaps the latter groups struggle more. So I think in all our sort of work, we need to bear in mind what use of what in what way is having an impact, really.
How actually on the question of more like on the area of excessive use of internet and social media, and specifically, how extensive and serious is really the phenomena of excessive use? I mean, we've been through some data today, and I know that excessive use doesn't necessarily only doesn't immediately lead to addiction. There are several factors to look at before we can talk about addictive behavior. But really, for us to understand how real is this problem, and what is the role that internet? Can we even assess the role of internet in the rise of mental health issues among kids and adolescents in some of the Western markets? Daria, please.
Very good question. I think, really the answer to this question would boil down to methodology primarily, really. So touching upon what Bernatka said earlier, thinking from a prevalence perspective, we have very, very few studies all around the world that would give us robust data in terms of telling us what is the prevalence rate of social media addiction. We know a little bit more now about gaming addiction, with gaming disorder having been recognized officially as a mental disorder this year. But when we're looking at the social media landscape, we have some data, but the significant majority of that data that we have around the world is very, very limited in terms of giving us actual prevalence estimates. Another thing that we really need to consider is the fact that, you know, as has been pointed out earlier, what we do have is self-report data from individuals that have been asked, often using questionnaires, online questionnaires. Now the question is, how truthful are the responses? To what extent are we actually measuring what it is we intend to measure? So is it addiction that we're looking for? Or is it just simply, you know, a person spending a lot of time being highly engaged with their social media? And I'm sure that a large majority of the participants in this room tonight actually is using their social media, is using their technology in something that perhaps some researchers would class as being problematic. So, you know, where do we draw the boundaries? In order to have a proper classification, what we need is psychiatrists like my colleagues to be able to actually diagnose in a face-to-face meeting with another person, with the person who may experience problems as a consequence of their technology use, whether or not addiction symptoms are present and whether or not that person would require treatment in order to overcome their symptoms. So I think, you know, we really, if we're asking questions like that, we do need to bear in mind the research landscape, and we do need to bear in mind the phenomenology of the problem. So how is the problem being experienced? What kinds of consequences are there? How long has it been going on for? And all of those kinds of questions are questions that are not sufficiently addressed in the present day and age when we're looking at research.
Absolutely, and what I find really interesting and funny in a way is that we're researching an area which is just totally filled with data, and what we are doing is we're putting questionnaires in front of respondents. And as you rightly point out in today's presentation, Daria, you know, we should be able to find, for scientific purposes, ways to actually read the big data behind our online usage, social media usage, mobile phone usage. Have you had any success moving forward on that in your country, or? And I know that you have been making attempts to actually have raw data.
Yes, very, very nicely put. So yes, we have made some attempts to try and get that data. So some of the studies that we've done, we've tried to use objective measures where we were looking at people's smartphone usage, actual usage, without them having to report to us how they're using it for how many hours, etc. So we have attempted that. I know this kind of data is available. That data is being collected by the large social media companies and by the gaming industry. However, it's not been made accessible to independent researchers like ourselves, which is a very big problem. So, you know, I'm very much in favor of the data being made available to us to make sure that we can use it in order to see about people's actual usage. Certain things, similar things have been done in the gambling context. So behavioral tracking has been used within problematic gambling or gambling in general, online gambling. And this has resulted in so much data, the amount of data that has come out of some of those studies that some of my colleagues are doing within Europe and beyond. You've got samples of 20 to 40,000 individuals with their gambling-related data, and this really gives you a very clear indication about what is actually happening. You know, what is the extent of a possible problem, and it gives you, you know, the kind of data that you can work with without needing to ask questions to individuals who themselves might be quite biased, who may not really know about their behaviors, or might not really be sure about what it is that a researcher might want from them. So I think, you know, if we are lucky, the future will be positive to the extent that we will have those multi-stakeholder collaborations, a cooperation between different people to be able to get the data and get the knowledge that we need, that we don't have right now.
So the positive news is that the data is available, it's just not available to the right people right now.
Yes.
Can I just jump in there, though? Yeah, I mean, I just wonder what a young person would do if they thought you were tracking their use. I mean, we know that they will have more than one device if they can, one that they show you and one that they use. We've seen it with social media accounts and the spam accounts where they'll have multiple accounts, but a very public profile one. And I think it's a really interesting challenge around data about how we engage users in seeing that the data that they might share with researchers could be in their interests, because otherwise we're trying to negotiate with an industry that is probably closer to the tobacco industry or pharmaceutical industry and is going to be very, very slow to share.
Actually, Richard, if I may, well, please, Bernatka, and then Richard, I have a question for you
Just wanted to quickly add, in
Please.
terms of the research, the other thing that it's really shocking. So if we want to do a research study in the UK, we have to go to an ethics committee just to do a very small study with a small number of people. It takes about 6 months to go through the application, to get the permissions. All sorts of questions are asked about how ethical is this study and about patients' rights. None of that happens in the online world. This data is harvested and mined and used, and anybody can get it and access. I mean, any of the companies use that data with no thinking about any of the ethical guidance around it. So there do need to be ethical standards around the use of this data and the same kind of values that we have in research elsewhere.
Já jenom doplním za tu populaci, o které tady teď mluvíme, za tu dětskou a dorostovou část. Většina dětí by moc ráda sdílela se svými rodiči to, co dělají na sociálních sítích, co jim píšou jejich kamarádi, co píšou oni jim. Oni by vážně chtěli, nebrali by to taky, že by je někdo kontroloval, ale rodiče nemají zájem. Buď to ten zájem tam chybí úplně ze jejich strany, anebo pak přichází ta druhá stránka a to je, že začnou kritizovat a hodnotit obsah, který děti sdílí na sociálních sítích. A já se pak nedivím těm puberťákům a skoro dospělým, že už se nechtějí svěřovat a už nechtějí dál komunikovat o tom, co vlastně na internetu dělají.
We're now talking a bit about how adolescents use social networks and actually their smartphones in general. Richard, I was meaning to ask you, can you maybe explain briefly, or even better, extensively, about your project with the BBC, with the Own It app? Because I've looked at that. Looks like a pretty potentially very helpful tool for young adults. And making their online experience safer.
Yes, the BBC had been part, as we saw earlier this morning, of an initiative from the Royal Family, the Royal Foundation, to work with the big tech companies and some charities to try and help young people or protect them from cyberbullying and some of the problems that arise when they get their first smartphone, which is now at around 8 years of age in the UK. For various reasons, the big tech companies did not want to pursue that, and I could go into that, but there may need to be a lawyer somewhere. Further to that, the BBC actually didn't want to provide another surveillance app where every time the child did something that the parent might disapprove of, an email would be sent to the parent to notify them, because they knew that wouldn't work. And I think showed a great deal of courage. But as a public body, I think they were able to, in developing something that was purely there for the child, to support the child. There's some very clever machine learning that was initially based on a cloud server that was, I don't really understand this, but in terms of edge computing, compressed to a small number of megabytes that made the app usable on any smartphone. And the idea is that there is a keyboard that assesses the sentiment of messages. So whether you're using Snapchat or Instagram or whatever it is, or a messaging app like WhatsApp, the keyboard would give you advice and some feedback about the sort of potential hate or sharing of personal details, whatever those risks are, live in real time. And then there are pop-up messages that could lead you to further content. So when a child gets their first smartphone, it's like a sort of, if any of you have seen the Disney film Pinocchio, a Jiminy Cricket that will be there on the device to give you some ideas. But what's also built into the app are various ways of measuring use, including use at night, the number of times you pick it up, and screen time in the broader sense, as well as mood trackers, where for the first time we might be able to correlate, as you would like, Daria, your activity with its impact on self-reported mood, or the way you send out distressing or hurtful messages from the keyboard. So there's lots and lots of functionality, and a lot of interesting conversations are going on now, because the data stays absolutely on the phone, but using principles like federated learning, that you might be able to take learning from that will help us. And I think that could be a real game changer, pushing that back to industry to say, no, you don't need to give us your data, we've got it ourselves.
I think that's a great effort. I think that could be a tool that really helps youngsters.
There's one caveat, which
Yes.
is, will it be used?
Exactly. That was my first question to you.
I
Does it have users? Yeah. I mean, I've been trying to understand, to keep it. I mean, I'm not an expert in any way or in any comparable way to all of you. But having spent a lot of time on the topic, I've been trying to somehow describe from my own understanding what the risks really are, for instance, for my own children. And I've kind of segmented them into 3 areas, even looking at the research that we have available thus up until now. One is encountering a bad experience on the internet, which obviously can be less or more bad, it can be less or more frequent, and it can be a hurtful comment, it can be a sexual assault, it can be a threat, it can be a variety of things. But I'd say that is one potential element of risk that we need to prepare our kids for, that they will inevitably experience bad experiences online. Although when I've seen research, it's actually looking at the older age group, from 15-year-olds and further, we see that they've kind of gotten used to it. It's so common that they're used to it, and they have roughly at least half of them have some sort of experience like that every month, for instance. Among the younger kids, probably because they still use mostly YouTube and other kinds of networks, the frequency is much lower, and maybe it's, let's say, they stumble upon content that is not really appropriate for them, or they don't understand. So that for me is like one of the aspects or facets of the issue. The next level is like, what impact does it have on the child's psyche, because they don't necessarily react in a uniform way. They don't. So sometimes they go talk to their parents or their siblings or their classmates. So there's a variety of reactions that I've also seen in the data. What I see is there are different sociodemographic risk groups. So, for instance, looking at teenage girls, they will tend to keep it to themselves more often, and without seeking proper help. So I see, let's say, they encounter a bad experience, but there still is a predominance of positive experiences mostly. But so there's a negative experience, an impact of that negative experience, and then the third part, the third threat or risk is excessive use. Looking at, let's say, the impacts it has mentally and physically, like sleeping disorder, whichever. So it's, let's say, excessive use would be the third kind of threat. Do you think my assessment is correct, or is there? I think Bernatke also talk a lot about what content you see when you are online. I hate to break it to you,
but I think there's many more risks than that.
Are there?
You've just only touched the surface. I mean, you think about the false information that's out there, the abuse of personal data, sort of hate crime. I mean, there's all sorts. So EU Kids Online, I think, does a very nice assessment. We've got a big grid with multiple categories. I'm afraid it goes much further than that. But in terms, I suppose what I wanted to add as well about how this might affect kids, and that's very much to do again with who you are and what you access. So, for example, there is this link with depression, but what we know from the more nuanced studies is that if you're already feeling quite down and quite low, then you start seeking out content that reflects your state of mind. Then, of course, by the inherent processes within the internet, you get bombarded by further negative content, and that then just amplifies and amplifies, and then you start to feel worse and worse. So, so if we had safety by design features, and for example, if somebody was accessing that kind of negative content, and then they were provided with support, with a helpline, for example, with different types of content, that could be a really good way in which we could try to moderate people's experiences and affect their mood in a more positive way. And tech companies should be responsible for providing that support. So when I spoke on the BBC last week, before I spoke, it was about online harms. what the presenter said immediately. There may be content here that you might find disturbing. Here is the telephone number. Here is our website if you need to find help and support. So my point is, if the BBC, for example, can provide free support like that, why can't internet companies and technology companies be doing that and providing that kind of online support to people who are in distress and accessing this kind of content?
I exactly love that keyword you said, safe by design. And I really enjoyed in your presentation today when you mentioned, I think it was basically, it was, I guess, a synthesis of how young people would actually want social networks to work in a safer way. And I think that that for me was a really nice example, because they also know a little bit more about the technological aspect of social networks. So it was really, I was really happy to see that, I don't know exactly what the age group was, but let's say adolescents would say that they want the basic level of privacy to be higher, to have more flexibility to make to keep their privacy. And I think that list of I don't know exactly how many things was, for me, that would be a good lead for the technological companies to put more safety in their design, wouldn't you say?
Can I just add something else as well? What kids really hate is when parents start posting things of them without their consent. So that's something else parents can do. Stop posting all those photos without checking out with your kids first, because it's there for life, isn't it? And the other thing that we've talked about, it's so important to have these conversations with young people, isn't it? They need to be involved in these discussions, and it's a shame we don't have many of them in the room today, but I think that's something, a really important area to go, and getting their points of view within all of this.
Yeah, maybe if I may, I would like to ask a question to the crowd. This phenomena of sharing your kids online is called sharenting, I think. Who has committed sharenting in their life ever? Has anyone posted a photo of their kids online? Yeah, I think the truth is coming out gradually. Thank you. I have myself done in the past, but from a certain point I stopped doing it because I realized that probably that's not, not everyone's business.
It's about consent, isn't it? So
yes.
as kids grow older, they have a view and a perspective, and so we ask them at home.
Yes.
Sometimes they're fine with it, and that's great. We share it with the family.
Right. Yeah.
Other times they really don't want it.
And it's becoming a universal thing, I'm quite careful about posting anything with any person.
Can I just add at the end that I think there's something about risk and about risks being proportionate. And what's really difficult, so even with an idea of sharenting and some young people really feel very uncomfortable, there's lots of other things parents can do that they find really embarrassing as well. But we have a media reporting system, certainly in the UK, that makes all risks sound about as bad can be all the time, which from a public health point of view makes people switch off, for one thing. But it's really difficult for anyone to get a sense of, well, if an image is shared, what are the consequences, And some e-safety organisations will say it'll be there forever, which probably leads to depression, to think that something is beyond your control. But actually, a lot of the time, it's not going to lead to anything particularly risky or harmful. But sometimes it does. And how do we try and make those...
Isn't it quite difficult to recognize which is benign? And you might think it's benign at the point of time when you're posting that image, but then since, the history stays online for nearly forever, then, once the kids grow up to being, going to school or being 13, 14, 15, isn't it the case that sometimes they are being bullied by their friends because of, they find something from their past posted by their parents or something of that sort?
I'm sure that's possible, but crossing the road is also dangerous.
Absolutely.
And so we don't say, never cross the road, you will die.
Yes,
Because life... So it's just bringing that sort of aspect of sort of proportionality and resilience in. And because a lot of young people, even if their friends do say, I found this really embarrassing picture, I mean, I certainly was teased at school. I suspect I wasn't the only one. Perhaps I was. But, and there are ways with humour and with other things, again, that's part of development, isn't it? So it's, if you eliminate harm altogether, safety is not living, is it? It's got a, learning from some of the risks as well. Just keeping that in the mix, really.
Yeah. Navigating.
But if anyone finds a picture of me from earlier,
I'll
I'll
have
be
a look.
somewhere else.
Jenom doplním, cílem vlastně není eliminovat všechny tyhle ty nežádoucí účinky, ono to ani nejde. Takže cílem je naučit své vlastní děti, jak se s tím potom mají vypořádat.
Also, perhaps because they will inevitably be in the situation. I mean, one topic we haven't touched upon and also hasn't been discussed to a greater extent today was cyberbullying. The research I've seen from our market is that children encounter cyberbullying more often when they are at an older age, let's say from 13 to 17-year-old. When they are younger, but then there's still 50-50, let's say the analog bullying versus cyberbullying. And among the younger kids, starting from 9 years old to about 11 or 12, it's like 2 to 1 in terms of regular bullying versus cyberbullying. So cyberbullying is less frequent there. I mean, so it seems to me that technology is to a certain way a facilitator of something that would normally occur, but then it becomes maybe anonymous when it's moves to the online space. What are you? Have you had particular clinical experiences with patients having experience with cyberbullying, or have some sort of insight that we can better understand what kids are going through on schools?
Just from a clinical and parental perspective, I think, firstly, I think face-to-face bullying is still more common. I think the Oxford group has shown that compared to cyberbullying, so we mustn't forget that either. But again, it's that resilience that's needed to deal with that, whether it's face-to-face or whether it's online. So the less resilient a child is, the less able they are to manage that. So I was saying an anecdote over the lunch break. So, for example, I was talking to my son a while back, and I said to him, how are your friends? He says, I don't see those friends anymore. And I said, why not? And he said, because they're on social media all night, and there was cyberbullying going on, all sorts of things, and I didn't want to have any part of that. So I stopped doing social media. Then when I go into school, I say to people what's going on, and they say, well, there's no point in telling you, you're not on social media, it's too much effort to update you. And so you lose a whole friendship group, which is quite powerful, isn't it? But my son can manage that because he doesn't have a mental health disorder. So at the same time, I'll be seeing depressed young people, girls in particular, in the clinic, who are really depressed, who really depend on their social group, and they'll be bullied online, all sorts of things will be happening. I say, why don't you just switch them off? Because I'll lose my network, and it's really important to me. And they don't have the resilience and the capability to be able to just turn it off, and they really do need a lot more support. So again, it's about being able to have that resilience, to have that support to be able to manage that.
Michaela, you wanted to add something?
Jenom jsem chtěla dodat, úplně prakticky souhlasím se vším, co paní doktorka říkala. Jenom je těžké vlastně naučit rodiče, jak mají naučit děti, aby byly odolnými. My žijeme ve světě přebytku, nadbytku a už to tady zaznělo několikrát v těch prezentacích během toho dnešního dne. Děti mají prakticky všechno hned a na dosah. A to je možná i to, co je potom vede k těm stavům nepohody, to znamená k úzkostem až potom k depresivním stavům. Takže zase, kdyby měla znít nějaká rada, tak chtít pro děti to nejlepší znamená nedávat jim to nejlepší.
Yeah, and in the Western media, we see a lot of talk about snowflake generation and kind of like a frictionless growing up from being a newborn to adulthood, where there is basically no iterations of conflict and is that something that you think is is a factor in mental health among young adults and children?
I mean, I have to say, in my work, I don't feel the young people I talk to have an experience of life as being frictionless. They feel a burden of demands, not least in education in the UK, where exam stress is very significant and prominent in some of the things that they really feel they struggle with. So it's quite hard to understand. I sometimes think that snowflake language is coming from an adult generation who looks at the sort of advances they are making through technology with envious and destructive eyes, really, and is sort of mocking. And actually you do see that with young people themselves, seeing younger children with iPads thinking, God, I wish I'd had that, and so on. So I think there are lots of dimensions to that, but I think it would be pretty nonsensical to think they're having the perfect life.
So it's probably just a catchword. But to a certain extent, but I have heard, I've had looked at some speeches related to the United States or debates where there were examples of, conflict being resolved at a very early stage at kindergarten, and everything, the era of political correctness being moved to the very early stages of when kids are in an institution such as kindergarten, where the intervention of the adult is coming much earlier than would be usual in some time, let's say 10, 15, 20 years ago. Also, parents are not allowed to let their kids go out alone until they're 12 years old. So that's where my question was kind of headed, where maybe we're just making too much effort to make sure that kids don't encounter anything adverse in the outside world. And then maybe they're just not prepared for the angry world of the social networks with the barking dogs that Michaela was showing today.
No, je to pravda, vlastně to je i takový paradox, protože když vezmu systém hodnocení ve školství, tak tam se hledá chyba. Když paní učitelka opravuje písemku, tak nehledá, co je dobře, ale hledá, co je špatně. A vlastně na to úplně navazuje. My máme pocit, že, a to je možná ten kámen úrazu, chyba přece není špatně. Dnešní děti, jenom děti, ale i dospělí se bojí selhání. A tak moc se bojí, že někde selžou, že obchází, hledají různé cestičky, anebo neříkají pravdu, lžou, až se potom dostávají do problému, ať už je to kyberšikana nebo něco, další jiný rizikový chování. Takže chyba je v pořádku. Když dítě nebo dospělý udělá chybu poprvé, OK, když podruhý, taky OK. Když po třetí, tak dobře, berme to jako, že testuje, jestli to taky nebo ne, ale když po čtvrtý, tak už to není chyba, ale je to rozhodnutí. A už jsme zase o té osobní zodpovědnosti. Přijde mi, kdybychom nehledali jenom to špatné, ale i to dobré a dávali najevo, že dělat chyby a selhání je v pořádku, tak bychom nebyli tak šíleně vystresovaní a možná bychom i žili celkem pohodový život. Možná.
Bernadka, I thought you wanted to add something.
Well, I do think this, the snowflake generation is very pejorative, really, isn't it? And I don't think it's fair on our young people. It's just different, isn't it? What's happening to the kids today? The stresses are different, the demands are different. We have this geopolitical crisis. Yes, we've had those before, but we have the extinction of the planet that they're worried about. The climate is something they're hugely concerned about. And then you have to really give it to people like Greta Thunberg and the young people involved in the climate movement. So there's a lot of people, young people doing really important work these days, and it's important to recognise that. But yes, to go back to your point about anxious parenting, I mean, colleagues of mine have done research around that, and there's very good evidence that anxious parents then generate very anxious children, and it's really important that the anxiety in parents is addressed in order to try and enable children. And yes, it's difficult. You can't teach resilience, as you were saying, but we know there are factors that are really important in terms of resilience. For example, having somebody supportive, a supportive adult you can talk to, we know is really important in terms of having better outcomes. And then the important things in life that are important, like exercise, having enough exercise, having enough food on the table, education. So there are certain things that we know are helpful in terms of producing resilience.
I have one kind of a bundle it's a wider topic that I would like to move our discussion towards to, and that is the question of whether what are the effective routes through institutional or legislative measures or multi-partisan ways to actually, I'm even reluctant to say tackle these problems because they will not be tackled, as was mentioned already in the discussion. But in Bernatka's and Daria's presentation, there were some concrete proposals on how to move forward, not only as also in governmental action or actual policies. What experience can we take? Can we adopt that maybe has already worked or you find as necessary in the UK?
As I said earlier, I'm very much in favor of a multi-stakeholder perspective where we get everybody involved, get everybody around the table, just like we're talking to each other today. Importantly, not disregarding the experience of the children and adolescents themselves, because very often, you get that top-down approach where they're being talked at, where they're being patronized. But like you very rightly mentioned earlier, they are the people with the knowledge. They're the ones who know technology inside out. They can teach us so many things. Talk to your kids, and you will have completely new experiences. They open up a new world for you. So get them involved, have their teachers involved, have their parents involved. But then, of course, also get representatives from the governments involved. And those individuals who are working for big social media companies. Social responsibility measures need to be taken. Some of the things that have been proposed in the UK are levies, so really, taking some of the money that is being made by those companies and really put it back into research, put it back into treatment, make sure that you're providing those kinds of services that those individuals may require who are having problems as a consequence of their technology use. So,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but
yeah.
do you see any political support for that?
Well, at the moment it's quite limited, at least in the UK, at least in our country. However,
barely taxed altogether.
Well, I think we are finding ourselves at a cutting edge where things are starting to develop, where the public discourse is growing, where there's a lot of media involvement, really starting those kinds of conversations. Where we're sitting here now today, I think is another really indication that we are having the dialogue. So, in my opinion and from my experience, I think things are going to happen relatively quickly now. So what I would anticipate within the UK at least is that there will be governmental support provided in terms of funding, so funding the research that we require, because it appears we do need that research, and some parliament select committees are really aware of what is needed. And then moving on from there, but getting larger organizations together on a regular basis, like the World Health Organization's Committee on Addictive Behaviors. We're coming together every year on a regular basis discussing the kinds of problems that people can have as a consequence of their gaming, for example. So although the situation isn't perfect, it's far from ideal. At this stage, I have a very positive and optimistic outlook, and I'm very sure that things are going to look better in the not too far away future.
Can I just give a different view on that?
Okay.
And I'm going to go straight to hell, I'm afraid. We had an online harms white paper and a consultation, and it was interesting that the minister charged with delivering that and bringing in regulation, if that's what happens, resigned because of online hate. And we're seeing a whole wave of female MPs in the UK give up their work in politics because of the degree of online harms directed particularly against women and women in positions of power. We have a problem in the UK, and I don't think it's ours alone, where we're entering a new sort of period of general election, and the political parties are leveraging social media in a way that would be not too far from other bad actors in that world, trying to persuade, coerce, and engage people in their particular direction. And I think we have the problem then that the government that might wish to seek regulation in terms of harms is actually investing and using those very same technologies. And you only have to look across the Atlantic to see how extensive that is. The CEO of Facebook has a conversation behind closed doors with someone called Trump. Right-wing extremism is being supported disproportionately in certain parts of the European Union, as I understand it. I think there are things about online harms that go way beyond what we're talking about today. and it is threatening. So I just thought I'd share.
Thank you for sharing.
Yes. I mean, I agree with both. There's something in both those perspectives, really, and you're absolutely right. So, you know, when you talk about the online harms, it's so much more, widespread than you suggested. But I do share some optimism, because I think there is the whole way to public opinion out there now, and there are campaigners we have, like the Molly Russell family, for example, and it is constantly in the media profile. So there is a push. And I'm hopeful that, and we've got this massive document, the online harms paper, nearly 400 pages, isn't it, documenting extensively the harms and the proposed new regulator. So I'm hopeful something will come out of that. And also, sorry, Richard, and also the social media companies, they're doing little bits now, more than they've ever done before. It's not enough, but they're being pushed into doing that by people like individual campaigners like Ian Russell. So I think there is a push at the moment, and we need to keep pushing.
You most certainly are very ahead in terms of even recognizing the issue. And as you've mentioned, the royal family has some sort of positive influence. And as we have discussed, you are quite frequently invited to speak in large media outlets on the topic. What would really interest me to hear is what kind of questions do you get asked when you are invited by BBC or anyone? What are they interested in hearing? Please.
I think one of the main questions that I'm being asked, and I'm sure you will share similar experiences, is coming from a perspective of over-pathologizing everyday behaviors, where gaming is all bad, where social media use is all bad, and what can we do in order to safeguard our children, in order to make sure that they're not going to be exposed to all of those harms and all of those dangers on the internet. Now, it is a very one-sided conversation that's most often to be had, and I doubt that I've ever given an interview where I've been asked specifically about the positive health benefits of using technology, whereas everybody always wants to hear case studies of that person who has died because of their technology use, or that person who's committed suicide, or something extreme that has happened. I do not believe that we need to have those kinds of case studies in order to be able to start that dialogue. I mean, admittedly, yes, in the UK, we have that kind of dialogue because of such instances, but is it really necessary for these kinds of examples? Is it not possible for us to have a balanced representation of different people talking about technology use that can be just as beneficial as it can be potentially harmful for a number of individuals? So I think, really the conversation needs to be put straight, and the media need to be aware that actually there is there's a second side to the coin as well.
So they often have questions, hoping to hear some alarming news, or
In my experience, yes.
I think people struggle. I mean, everyone is struggling with this, and the questions are not dissimilar. What can we do about it? But yeah, I agree about the need of a balanced perspective. And I don't know how developed things are here in terms of digital online help and support, because there are companies that we use regularly in the National Health Service in the UK where young people can access online counselling, and that's been recommended by NICE, the National Institute of Clinical Excellence, as well. So that's a big area that's moving forward quite quickly, and that's a big, important, positive area. And in New Zealand, for example, there's a whole government-led initiative whereby online help and support is going to be available in every school for all school pupils as well. So there are other countries that are using technology in a positive way, and that comes with its own challenges as well. But I think, that there are lots of opportunities that we need to harvest, which maybe we're not at the moment, and we need to be expanding on.
Just still speaking about what can be done, I would say legislatively or centrally or governmentally. We've spoken also about some positive examples from South Korea, I think it was Australia or New Zealand. Do you think there are any inspirations to be learned from the experience in these markets, especially obviously Daria, you mentioned that they're quite good in raising awareness and doing marketing campaigns to raise awareness among the general public. Are there any particular inspirations that we can learn from here in Europe or the Czech Republic, in your opinion?
Yes, absolutely. So we've, as I've mentioned before, absolutely there are wonderful examples of prevention measures that have been taken in countries like South Korea, but also other countries around the world, which we can certainly in the UK we can benefit from that. I'm sure we can benefit from that here in the Czech Republic as well and in other places. And one of the things, of course, is the multi-stakeholder perspective, as I've mentioned before. So thinking about getting groups of people together to have a dialogue together, because even if we are raising awareness through educational campaigns, speaking to children in schools, as in the context of their regular school curricula, this is a fantastic thing to do. However, we cannot impose these sorts of things on younger generations. They do not want to be patronized. They want to actively engage in the conversation. And I think that's one of the things that is not considered enough. So really having them involved in coming up with the solutions, not just thinking about the problems, how do you, what do you fear on the internet, what kinds of dangers have you been exposed to, but really talk to them about what is it that you do actively in order to protect yourself. Because, when we're speaking to younger children and adolescents, they are very clever, they're extremely resourceful, they are much more resilient than we think they might be, and very often they are coming up with their own solutions, like you were mentioning earlier, your son, for example, just saying, okay, I'm just going to quit right now because there's something's happened that I'm not happy about. So really using them as a source of knowledge and understanding of positive, healthy technology use, I think this is one of the key things that I would very strongly advocate.
Can I just add a few thoughts as well, having been the voice of doom, that I think one of the facts that the online harms paper in the UK revealed was that most people would prefer more choice in this space. They're not always happy with the platforms that are dominant in the space. And I think having alternatives and supporting development of alternatives and actually also showing examples of good practice, there are some people doing a better job. One of the apps I know a little bit about, Yubo, if any of you know the streaming app for young people, very popular. They've got some really clever AI that's really, and notifications, kind of to protect and nudge young people in the right direction. And I think if we see more of that, because I think probably this is why I'm questioning whether a government that is using social media so much can really be an enforcer of regulation. But if they can, or we can, shift the market, because it's those commercial forces that are probably going to, if the customer wants something better and different, then that might actually lead to more change too.
Pouze jenom ještě doplním. Mám teď tu možnost spolupracovat v rámci projektu pro ministerstvo školství na vytváření digitálních kompetencí, respektive digitálního profilu občana České republiky, a cílem tohoto projektu je nastavit takovou komunikační a vzdělávací strategii, aby nebyli občané České republiky digitálně vyloučeni. V rámci toho programu tam pracuje několik pracovních týmů. My jsme do toho zapojili i mladí puberťáky. Oni se nám ozvali, byli ochotní s námi spolupracovat a můžu vám říct, že vlastně všechno bylo pak úplně jinak. Všechny naše ideály, kterými jsme měli, tak jsme přehodnotili na základě toho, co nám řekli oni. Tak jenom jsem chtěla doplnit, že souhlasím s Dariou o tom, co teď říkala.
Thank you, Michaela. I was just going to ask you what your experiences are with moving ahead with some form of change in the Czech Republic with respect to policy, because I know you've been involved in some of these discussions. How would you describe our stage of development in this area, and what do you see happening right now that might maybe be a positive move forward?
Určitě, já jsem od přírody optimista, takže mám radost, že i v rámci spolupráce s různýma ministerstvama, nejenom teda, jsem tady zmiňovala ministerstvo školství, ale vlastně i Rada vlády dělá skvělý projekty, ministerstvo vnitra v rámci bezpečnosti na internetu dává úžasné projekty. Já mám takový pocit, že Česká republika je prosociální stát, máme tady spoustu organizací a služeb, které pomáhají pomáhají. Já mám pocit, že těch nápadů máme fakt hodně, že jestli nám něco jde, tak to, že jsme kreativní, že chceme, že máme odvahu a sílu a ochotu něco měnit. Z mého pohledu to občas troskotá buď to na nedostatku financí a bohužel i na tom, že ta naše snaha často trvá moc dlouho a pak docházíme k pocitu vyhoření a říkáme si, tak má to smysl nebo nemá smysl. To je na jedné straně a na druhé straně u těch cílových klientů tam to ztroskotává, a je to teda můj názor, nevím, jestli to je pravda, na nedostatku autorit. Vůbec obecně tady v celé republice mám pocit, že fakt chybí autority, chybí lidi, kterým bychom mohli důvěřovat a to vlastně je něco, co se děti neučí a neumí.
Yes, I think, apart from, I think two of the major influencers and YouTubers in Czech Republic, Kovy and Jirka Král, I haven't seen many actual, real, powerful ambassadors even speak about the topic. If I were to say, I think that one of the things that we are missing is interest on the level of like really senior officials, having some form of authority. And even at least putting the thing on the political map as a topic.
Já mám pocit, že ten zájem tady je, ale každý, a teď to řeknu přeneseně, ten zájem má na tom svém vlastním pískovišti. A jestli by něco mohlo doporučit, jestli by se něco mohlo změnit, tak propojení a ta multidisciplinarita je tady zásadní.
Yeah, just for our British guests, I think we have about 2,300 different organizations, charities, foundations, and different kinds of these like entities that are in some way focused on providing help and prevention, and so there's quite a lot of organizations, but the market is enormously fragmented. That's just to. From what Michaela has been speaking about. I have a slightly provocative end note and a question to put forward because it somehow has something to do with what we are speaking today and is also a governmentally imposed solution, although I'm definitely not a fan of it, but I'd like to hear your opinion on it. What do you think of China's attempts to take a social network and actually implement it as a way to manage a society with their social scoring and such, which they are testing right now?
Sesame credit or social credit system?
Yes, that's what I mean. Yeah. Social credit system. Positive
I have
behavior
to say,
is being
what
rewarded.
alarms me most about that is I am aware of certain UK ministers that have travelled to China with enthusiasm to learn how to implement it. This is where the sort of challenge for us as citizens and users of services needs to sort of be vocal earlier, I think, rather than later, about the power to control your movement, your life, through various judgments that are made about your use of tech and other behaviours. So, yes, not a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, I want to raise this topic because I think we're pretty fortunate to have multinationals operate our social media landscapes, and not much regulation being in place because it can kind of sometimes can get out of hand. So I think it's.
But have any of the big tech companies challenged China, really?
No, the point is that China has quite a few local lookalike products, products that would be of similar fashion as Google and YouTube and Facebook. So I think we're better off having YouTube, Google, and Facebook.
I think I would agree with what Richard has said here, really. There are certain problems. I mean, it seems as if in China we are in a space where it's a dystopian future that has become our present, or their present day. How they're leading their lives right now, and I don't think that this is in any shape or form anything that we can aspire to. At the same time, I think, having the knowledge that these sorts of things might be happening might make us aware of a future that we in Europe, we don't want to be part of, that this is something that we want to ensure we will never, have happen in our own country. So really, again, starting that kind of idea of, what is it that we want from our technology, how can our technology support us, and is technology something that is going to control us? So I'm personally very strongly in favor of, the owning your data movement. So if you were to own your data, these sorts of things would be impossible. And I would encourage, taking the power over our data back. The question is, how is it going to be possible to do that? But I think, the more we engage in that kind of a conversation, the more we will be able to, as technology users, we'll be able to get our data back and use it the way that we want it to be used, rather than just having everybody else making use of it without us actually knowing about it.